Across the room stood the pit fiend holding a chain leash with the three-headed beast. The beast began to snarl and jerk on his chain. The pit fiend was the height of 3 men, the head of a horned demon, and in one clawed hand held a mace that dragged on the stone floor. This fiend's power created an aura of fear that paralyzed most creatures, but the paladin had just faced the demon lord himself and would not succumb to this evil creature. Darkio spoke softly.
Fowler, Vicar, the beast. The rest, we get the fiend.
Then Darko grabbed Daryl by the shoulder.
Lad, watch out for the tail of the fiend. It is a quick whip that can cut you in half. Keep from the corners. Even your speed may not match the pit fiend's mace.
The silence was shattered by the screams of imps who leaped from the darkness, knives drawn in a surprise attack. The paladin's sword swirled in deadly arcs, slashing the imps, and in an instant it was once again quiet. The pit fiend grimaced at the paladin, seeing his imps so easily destroyed. Glowering, showing his fangs, he leaned his mace against his leg and reached over to his beast's collar, and with his claws removed the pin. The chain fell to the floor, and the 3 heads raised up and howled. Vicar's crossbow twanged, and the bolt flew into the exposed chest of the beast. Blood spurted from the beast's wound, and the middle head fell lifeless. The remaining 2 heads turned to stare at their fallen triplet, then spun back to the intruders. Enraged, the beast leaped into the air. Twang! Another bolt. Where am I?
Another bolt. Oh, yeah.
I don't know where I am out here.
Okay, we're at 20. I think it then fell dead.
Where? Okay.
All right.
The pit fiend leaned forward, and for a moment it seemed to Daryl that the fiend mourned his loss. Then his eyes narrowed. He bared his fangs and screamed his rage at the paladins. He threw the chain aside, lifted his mace, and began to slowly move on to his prey. The fiend's massive body rippled with muscle and sinew. His horned head turned back and forth as the paladin spread out behind the columns that bordered the chamber. The fiend's tail began to twitch. Darko shouted,
Watch out for the tail's whip.
Terrell thought the fiend was too far from him to be attacked, but that was a mistake. The tail whipped out and sliced toward the young paladin. Darrell drove behind a column as the tail sliced barely over his head and struck the stone column, shattering it. As the column fell, the stone ceiling also began to cave in. Darrell pressed himself against the stone wall as the huge stones fell around him. The air was filled with dust, and the fiend was ready with his mace to strike at Darrell. The pit fiend looked down from the paladin with the golden glowing sword. Instinct confirmed this was the easiest kill. He raised his mace held firmly in his clawed hand. Darrell crouched down, sword ready, but the fiend towered over him 3 times his height, giving few options for attack. The fiend struck out at Darrell. The mace struck the wall where Darrell stood an instant before. The mace swung back too low, and Darrell jumped over the club as it flew by. Darrell wanted to close in on the fiend, but he... Where is it?
I think you went down too fast.
But he was yet unable to judge the whip's tail. The fiend was ready to strike again. But now the other paladins had surrounded the fiend. Before the fiend could strike, Verkar shot a bolt from his crossbow that struck the fiend in the wrist below the mace. Although the fiend did not stop his strike, the bolt caused his swing to miss Daryl and harmlessly smash into a stone block that had fallen from the roof. The fiend took a step back and spotted Farluk approaching to throw his spear. Farluk thought that the fiend was focused on Daryl and did not see the tail whip at him. The tail struck his arm below the spear and wrapped around his arm, then lifted him into the air and threw him against the stone wall. Fowler hit the wall with a loud thud and fell unconscious to the ground. Leo ran to Fallock, gently removed his helmet, lifted his head, then turned to the other paladins and shook his head, announcing the loss of his brother. Vikar shot another bolt at the fiend that sheared the central horn off the fiend's head. The fiend spun on Vikar, which gave Leo time to lift up the body of Falkar and carry it back to the entrance.
Let's stop here.